Now, once upon a time, the Star Wars saga was just three movies that, at their core, were about a son who saved and redeemed his father, while a ragtag group of rebels brought freedom to the galaxy. Many years later, that story was expanded to six parts, and became essentially the rise, fall, and redemption of the Chosen One Anakin Skywalker, who ultimately brought balance back to the Force with his sacrifice. All the while, in the background of these six movies, we also get to see the fall and then return of both the Jedi and the Republic. And by and large, I'd say that most fans agree that the first six episodes of the Star Wars saga felt like a complete story with a perfectly satisfying ending. Sure, some might have mixed feelings about the execution of the prequels or the quality of those movies and just how that story was told, but few people seem to take issue or exception with the story itself, or make the argument that the prequels don't belong or shouldn't be a part of it in that respect, story-wise, I mean. And so then when it comes to the sequel trilogy, perhaps the biggest challenge they faced in making them was justifying their existence or finding a place and purpose for them in a story that had once been not only complete, but again had ended in a very satisfying way. In other words, there has to be a good in-universe reason why the story of Anakin Skywalker didn't end with his death and redemption in Return of the Jedi, that it didn't end when he brought balance to the Force by destroying the Sith and ushering in a new age for the Jedi. And yes, not to get into all that here, but balance in Star Wars is indeed the absence of the Sith, or the absence of those who would use the dark side and serve their own selfish desires, and instead only having Jedi who selflessly use the light side to serve the will of the Force. Or at least, that's what balance was when George Lucas was in charge and making these films. But anyway, and to get back on point here, only looking at this from the story perspective and not at it from the Disney or business perspective, where of course a sequel trilogy was going to be created in order to make a ridiculous amount of money just off the names episodes 7, 8, and 9, the main thing these movies needed to do was to find a way to carry on the story in a meaningful way, and then to give us a better, more satisfying and concrete ending than the one Return of the Jedi gave us. And in general, there was really only two good choices or possibilities in order to pull that off. The first and probably the safest and easiest route for them to go with the sequels was to just introduce some type of new external threat or threats to challenge the recently established New Republic and Jedi Order, a difficult test of sorts that, once defeated, would affirm that everything our heroes had re-established or fought for in the original trilogy, after it fell apart in the prequels, would now endure, that the legacy of Anakin Skywalker would carry on through the Jedi and his descendants. And no, this wouldn't be just another threat to the peace in the galaxy or the balance of the Force. Instead, it would need to be something that ups the ante and was a threat to the existence of maybe the galaxy and the Force itself. Something like the return of the Wills or the emergence of a renegade Will who, for whatever reason, seeks to destroy everything. And if you're wondering what the Wills even are, well, we never exactly got a definitive answer from George Lucas. But most likely, and to put it very, very simply here, they're a type of god or powerful ancient species. They may even be the Force itself in some respect. In fact, the story of Star Wars is said to be written in the Journal of the Wills, and in the very little we've learned about what George Lucas's version of the sequel trilogy would have looked like, it seems they would have been involved or played a part. In other words, it's likely Lucas would have gone with what I'm suggesting here, some sort of new external threat that needed to be dealt with. He would have seen the story of Anakin Skywalker essentially being done, and the only thing left to do would be to challenge those who would carry on his legacy. And so then the sequels would be a story that don't undo anything about the ending of Return of the Jedi, where balance in the Force was achieved by Anakin's sacrifice. Rather, it would embrace that ending and play off of it to, you could say, put a nice little bow on things to accentuate what the saga already was and the story it had told. It would in no way attempt to open that story back up to add a new aspect to it per se, or worse yet, try to retell it in some capacity, because Lucas was not a fan of retelling stories or doing the same thing again, hence one of the reasons why the prequels are much different from the original trilogy. For example here, something that could have been done with the sequels and would have been much different from the previous two trilogies, and this is just a random idea so don't critique it too heavily please, maybe the Force finally being brought into balance awakens the Wills, which is why they created the prophecy of the Chosen One for the Jedi in the first place, to bring the galaxy back into a state that would facilitate their return, and once they're back it will spell doom for the galaxy, and only Luke and the new generation of Jedi he's training can stop them. Okay then, the other direction that they could have taken the sequel trilogy in is more difficult and far more likely to cause issues with the lore, Lucas's vision, and to anger the fans. Though if pulled off well, it could have actually added another worthy chapter to the story of Anakin Skywalker himself, and to the saga on the whole. And that was to open the original story back up, if you will, to undo the balance that was achieved at the end of Return of the Jedi, and to imply there was something yet left for the Chosen One to do. Not to mention, it could and would also make Anakin, or Darth Vader, a big part of the story still. And quite honestly, after The Force Awakens, that's the direction I thought the sequel trilogy was going in. I thought it was going to set up, albeit via proxy, an external battle of sorts between Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker that would be fought through Kylo Ren and Rey, where Kylo, the grandson of Darth Vader, was being influenced by some dark side remnant of him attached to that helmet, or maybe by the dark side itself, and that he felt like, as gets said in the movie, that there was something Vader had started that he was now destined to finish, if he could only rid himself of that pesky pull to the light. Rey's purpose then was primarily to stop him, that she was being led to Luke by Anakin, and perhaps the other Force ghosts as well, so that he would train her. Hence, Anakin's lightsaber called out to her and showed her things, because it was simply Anakin working through it for one reason or another. And that reason, I kind of figured, was most likely because the Force ghosts are currently unable to manifest as they once were, thanks to, let's say, the return of Snoke, who could be an ancient being long since thought dead, but that was instead only dormant and waiting for the Sith to die off to take their place. And so then when this ancient, powerful dark side being emerged and corrupted Ben Solo, Luke went to the first Jedi Temple to see if, while there, he'd be able to again commune with the Force ghosts, or at the very least, to learn more about Snoke and how to stop him and maybe save Ben. And yet he finds no real answers there of any kind, and the Force ghosts don't appear to him. So he figures the only thing he can do is wait, to be like a Jedi and have patience, even if it means the ones he cares about are hurting. This actually shows growth for the character of Luke, and how he's progressed from what Anakin used to be, that though he still loves his family and friends and will do anything for them, he will not allow them to be a weakness or for him to act irrationally to try and save them, like he did in The Empire Strikes Back, and like was the reason Anakin fell to the dark side. And so then when Rey eventually shows up and hands him the lightsaber that once belonged to Anakin, Luke would understand this was a message from his father, a message from the Force ghosts that told him the key to stopping Snoke and maybe saving Ben was to train this girl. But then The Last Jedi happened, and I know many people blame the current state of the sequel trilogy on J.J. Abrams for leaving Rian Johnson in a difficult spot story-wise, that J.J. left him so many mysteries that there was just no way to answer them all and continue that story in one movie. But let's be real here, we're talking about Star Wars. These are supposed to be some of, if not the best writers and directors in the world working on these movies, striving to be a part of this franchise. I mean, after all, Star Wars is seen as the pinnacle in the industry by many, I would imagine. And you couldn't find someone that could think of a way to carry on JJ's story to give a great payoff to all of that, or at least most of those questions? And instead you hired a guy who did nothing with any of it, who said the hardest thing he had to figure out was why Luke went to that island, when that answer was basically already given to us and him in The Force Awakens, when Han talked about Luke looking for the first Jedi Temple after Ben Solo turned on him, meaning Luke most likely went there to find a way to save Ben and to stop Snoke, not to just let himself die, something he could have just as easily done on any planet in the galaxy, like going back to Tatooine, for example. But I digress, because The Last Jedi now is what it is, and for better or worse, that movie placed the onus of not only the entire sequel trilogy on just Kylo Ren and Rey's shoulders, but the whole saga as well. And it's hard to end everything the saga has been about, which is the story of Anakin and the balancing of the Force, and the end of the Sith and the return of the Jedi, with pretty much just these two characters, because one of them, Kylo Ren, wants the past to die and to have nothing to do with any of it, while the other one, Rey, has no real connection to any previous characters or events. And I know there are some people out there who like or even love what The Last Jedi did, that they like the direction it took the story in, and that it made it all about Rey and Kylo Ren because it's their story now, that it doesn't belong to the old characters anymore, which I don't entirely disagree with. Because yeah, this should have become their story as they became more a part of it, more ingrained into it. Problem is, all these new characters have done is separate and distance themselves from those old characters and what the story once was about. And if the sequel trilogy was only going to use the first 6 parts of the saga to springboard to something different, and not to expand on the first 6 parts and to ultimately conclude that story in a better and more satisfying way than it originally was done, then should this really be called the sequel trilogy, or should it be called something else? And so at this point, for me at least, to make this feel like the Skywalker saga again, the Skywalker who must rise in Episode 9 is Anakin. And don't get me wrong here, I love Luke. He's my favorite character, and I hope we get a better explanation for why he ran away to live alone on an island, to drink fresh green milk and to do some spearfishing, all the while just wanting to die. But what might be even a bigger tragedy here than what was done directly to Luke is what was done indirectly to Anakin's story and how it's been rendered mostly irrelevant, because he was supposed to be the chosen one who brought balance to the Force, yet only a few years after his sacrifice to kill Palpatine, Snoke apparently showed up and broke that balance, and as of yet, we've been given no sort of explanation as to why or how what was accomplished in the first 6 movies has been undone so quickly. Not to mention, suddenly darkness rising and light to meet it is a thing now, which makes it sound like a chosen one should come about all the damn time, or every time a dark side user starts getting a bit too powerful. Which I guess means Anakin was nothing special after all, even though Qui-Gon Jinn seemed to think he was the chosen one spoken of in an ancient prophecy, and the other Jedi seem skeptical of this, which seems to imply it's not something that happens, relatively speaking, all of the time. And so, in my opinion here, and you're certainly free to disagree with me and tell me your thoughts in the comments below, Episode 9 needs to try and fix the legacy of Anakin Skywalker. That, along with being a good, enjoyable movie, of course, needs to be its top priority. And the fact that this movie is called The Rise of Skywalker says to me that there's a really good chance J.J. Abrams gets that he at least understands the damage done to the whole saga by The Last Jedi and will seek to fix it. And I think there's a really good chance that Anakin won't be the only Skywalker to quote-unquote rise in this movie, that it may mean all of them, from Anakin to Luke and Leia down to Ben, will ultimately be redeemed in some respect in this movie. And of course the question then becomes, can he even pull that off at this point, with just one movie to work with? Well, if you brought Palpatine back as a means by which to give Anakin a small yet major part to play in this film, that he'll somehow have a hand in Palpatine's final demise, then I have even more hope here, because it further implies that JJ realizes that he now has to, in a sense, redo the ending of Return of the Jedi and bring the Force into some sort of final balance again. He realizes that the only way to end this trilogy, or what it's become, is to find something for Anakin to do and to be a part of it again. And there may be no better way to do that than to bring Palpatine back, even though I don't think that was his original plan. Instead, I think Snoke was meant to be the big overarching villain that Rey and Kylo would have to figure out a way to take out, that these two aspects of Anakin, his dark and light side halves, would have to come together to stop this long-forgotten threat, or something like that. It's hard to know exactly where JJ saw this trilogy going after just The Force Awakens, but I do think it was something along those lines. Anyway, in closing here, as I've said before, I really just hope Episode 9 finds a way to be a good movie, and I think its best chance at that is to do exactly what the title of the movie seems to imply will happen: help the Skywalkers rise again, help repair their legacy. It's absolutely baffling to me that Lucasfilm let both Luke and Anakin's story suffer so greatly in this sequel trilogy, and that now you have to try and fix it in the first place with the last movie of the saga. But we can't change the past, can we? We can't kill it if we want to, and with any luck here, Lucasfilm can learn from their mistakes and failures with Episode 8, which would be ironic since it was the theme of the movie, to learn from your mistakes. And hopefully they'll repair the legacy of the family that is the backbone of their entire franchise. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think. Should Episode 9 try to focus on fixing the legacy of Anakin Skywalker? Do you think that's what the name of this movie might be implying even? Or do you disagree with me about all of this? Either way, let me know what you think in the comments below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.